I've paid rent to my parents since 16, but when they tried to hike it after college, I finally chose freedom over family control. I've been living at home while attending university, and I'm almost done now, with just a few months to go before graduation. Honestly, I can't wait to be done, not just because of school but because of my living situation. My parents have been charging me rent since I was 16. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, right? It all started when I got my first real job. Well, technically it's my own business. I started a small company when I was about 15, mostly because I was super into tech stuff, and it kind of blew up. I'm making around $160,000 a year now, which I thought was great. And I guess my parents thought so too, because the moment they found out I was making adult money, they decided I could handle adult responsibilities. That meant rent. At first, I didn't even question it. I thought, hey, I'm making good money, and $300 a month isn't bad. Plus, it's my parents, so maybe this is their way of teaching me responsibility or something. I was cool with it. I mean, I had my own space, my own schedule, and I was mostly independent. But looking back, that was where everything started going wrong. You know how when you're a teenager you still expect your parents to be your parents? Sure, I was paying rent, but I still thought they'd treat me like their kid. But the moment that rent started, everything changed. They acted like I was just another tenant in their house. My room? That wasn't my room anymore. It was the room I rented. They'd walk in whenever they wanted, no knocking, no warning. I'd be in the middle of something, and boom, they'd barge in like they owned the place, which technically they did. But come on, some basic respect would have been nice. I started setting up boundaries. I cleaned my room when I wanted to, not when they told me to. I did my own laundry, bought my own groceries, and cooked my own meals. I figured if I was paying rent, I might as well live how I wanted, right? But of course, that didn't sit well with them. They'd make these snide comments about how I was separating myself from the family. Like, seriously? I'm paying you rent, and you're acting like I owe you even more? Things really started getting bad when they realized I wasn't going to just play along with their whole "we're still your parents, and we can control everything you do" thing. It was like they wanted me to be independent and dependent at the same time. They wanted the rent money but didn't want me to act like someone who pays rent. I remember one time I was doing laundry at like 10 p.m. Not even late, right? But my mom comes storming into the laundry room and starts lecturing me about how I'm disturbing the family schedule. I'm standing there, holding a basket of socks, thinking, what family schedule? I literally buy my own food and eat on my own schedule. What does my laundry have to do with you? But she didn't care. She was just mad that I wasn't doing things on her time. And don't even get me started on the whole family meals thing. They'd always plan these dinners. But half the time, they wouldn't even tell me. So I'd be in my room, doing homework or working on my business, and my dad would randomly knock, if I was lucky, and tell me dinner's ready, like, cool, but I didn't even know we were having dinner together. Then they'd guilt trip me for not spending time with them. It got to the point where I just started making my own meals. I figured if I'm already living like I'm on my own, I might as well go all the way. But the real issue was spring break. This year, for spring break, I planned a trip to Mexico with some friends. It was my last spring break in university, and I wanted to do something fun before the stress of graduation and my new job hit. I didn't think it was a big deal. I mean, I'm 21, I'm paying rent, and I'm responsible for myself, right? Wrong. Apparently, my parents had this whole big family gathering planned for the exact same week, but they never told me. Like, I literally had no idea this was happening. So I get back from Mexico, all sunburnt and exhausted, and they sit me down like I'm about to get grounded. They were so mad that I wasn't there for the family thing. My dad's going on about how I disrespected the family by choosing my friends over them. I was sitting there like, what? You didn't even tell me this was happening. How's this my fault? Then my mom hit me with the big one. You're grounded. I swear, I almost laughed out loud. Grounded? I'm 21, I pay you rent, and you're grounding me? What is this, high school? I just stood up, walked to my room, and locked the door. I could hear them yelling outside, banging on the door, but I wasn't having it. They actually thought they could ground me like I'm still some teenager under their thumb. I stayed in my room the whole night, ignoring them. They kept banging, saying I was being disrespectful, but what did they expect? I wasn't about to let them treat me like a kid while also demanding I pay rent. It's one or the other. You can't have both. The next day, things were tense. My parents barely spoke to me, which was fine by me. I started realizing that they didn't really want me to be independent, they wanted control. They wanted to keep me under their roof so they could keep calling the shots, all while taking my money. It was starting to feel more like I was renting from a couple of really controlling landlords than living with my parents. And honestly, I was done. I started thinking about leaving for good. But I wasn't sure if it was the right move yet. I had a few months left until graduation, and I didn't want to make things harder than they had to be, but at the same time I couldn't stay in a place where I was constantly being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. Something had to change, and soon. So after that whole grounding thing, things just went downhill. I thought it couldn't get worse, but of course I was wrong. It wasn't just about me missing the family gathering anymore. It was like my parents had made it their personal mission to get back at me for the Mexico trip. They couldn't let it go. Every little thing I did seemed to piss them off. I'd wake up late, and they'd act like I'd committed some huge crime, like I was disrespecting their whole house or something. It felt like I couldn't breathe without them watching and judging me. But let me tell you about the day things really blew up. After Mexico, I kept to myself more. I didn't want to deal with their drama. I figured if I just stayed in my room and minded my own business, they'd cool off eventually. I was wrong again. My mom had this big idea that we needed to reconnect as a family. Honestly, it felt more like they just wanted to control me, but whatever. She told me we were having a family dinner, and that I had to be there. No excuses. I didn't argue, I just showed up because at that point, I didn't want to give them any more reasons to freak out on me. So I go downstairs, and it's already tense. My dad's sitting at the table, looking like he's ready to give me another lecture, and my mom's got this fake smile plastered on her face, like everything's fine. I knew it wasn't fine. I could feel the awkward energy in the room the second I sat down. My mom starts asking me about school, work, and my future plans. Normal stuff. I thought maybe we were just going to have a regular conversation for once. Nope. My dad jumps in and starts going off about responsibility, respect, and all that. He basically said I needed to stop acting like I was above the family. I was sitting there, eating my dinner, thinking, what the hell does that even mean, above the family? Because I went on one trip with my friends? It wasn't like I skipped their get-together on purpose. I didn't even know about it until I got back. But he wasn't letting it go. He started bringing up how I never help out around the house anymore, how I don't spend time with them, how I disrespect their rules. I just sat there, biting my tongue, trying not to blow up because I knew if I said what I was thinking, it was only going to make things worse. Then my mom drops the bomb. Maybe we should increase your rent if you're going to act like you don't live here anymore. I swear, I nearly choked on my food. Increase my rent? Are you kidding me? I was already paying $300 a month, and now they wanted more? For what? For not being at their beck and call every second of the day? I was fuming inside, but I kept my cool. I just looked at her and said, "Are you serious? You're already charging me rent like I'm some stranger living here, and now you want more?" My dad backed her up immediately. He started talking about how they gave me everything, how they've supported me, and now I'm just using them for a place to stay. That was the final straw for me. I stood up, looked them both in the eye, and said, "I'm not using you. I've been paying rent since I was 16. You've been treating me like a tenant for years, so don't act like you're doing me some huge favor by letting me live here." It got really quiet after that. My mom tried to say something, but I just walked away. I went straight to my room, slammed the door, and started packing my stuff. I wasn't planning to leave right then, but I needed to feel like I had some control over the situation. I wasn't about to keep living in a place where I was constantly being disrespected and treated like I didn't belong. Later that night, I got a text from my mom. She said she didn't mean to make me feel unwelcome, but that they deserved more respect from me. I didn't even respond. I was done. I needed a plan, and I needed to get out of there. That's when I called my grandpa. Now, my grandpa's always had my back. He was the one who helped me get my business started, gave me advice on how to handle money, and just generally looked out for me. I figured he'd be the one person who'd understand what I was going through, so I explained everything to him. The rent, the Mexico trip, the family dinner, all of it. He was quiet for a while, and then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Maybe it's time you moved out for good." At first, I wasn't sure how to take that. Like, did he mean I should just give up on my parents? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I was already pretty much independent. I paid my own way, I had my own business, and I was about to graduate and start a new job. What was the point of staying in a place where I was constantly being made to feel like a burden? So I started looking for places. I didn't tell my parents. I figured I'd wait until I had something lined up before I said anything. But it didn't take long for them to notice I was pulling away even more. I'd come home late, go straight to my room, and avoid them as much as possible. They tried talking to me a few times, but I just wasn't interested. I wasn't going to waste my energy on people who clearly didn't care about me unless it benefited them. Then one night, it all came to a head. My mom knocked on my door, which was surprising because usually, they just barged in. She asked if we could talk. I didn't want to, but I figured I'd give her one last chance. So I opened the door, and she came in with this sad look on her face, like she was the victim here. She started telling me how hard it's been for her and Dad, how they're just trying to do what's best for me, and how they didn't mean to push me away. I sat there, listening, waiting for her to say something real, something that would actually make me feel like they understood. But it never came. Instead, she ended the whole thing by saying, "We just want you to be a part of this family again." That's when I realized they didn't get it. They didn't see me as part of the family anymore. To them, I was just someone who lived in their house and paid rent. I wasn't their kid, I was a tenant, and no amount of guilt-tripping was going to change that. I stood up, told her I was moving out, and that I'd be gone by the end of the month. She didn't say anything, she just nodded and left the room. And that was it. I knew I had made the right decision. Update 1. So after I told my mom I was moving out, things got awkward real fast. They didn't really talk to me much after that, which was fine because I wasn't trying to have any deep conversations with them either. It's not like they suddenly realized they'd been treating me like crap. Nah, it was more like they were just pissed that I had the audacity to leave. But then, just when I thought things had quieted down, my grandpa shows up at the house. Now let me tell you, my grandpa is not the kind of guy who just drops by without a reason. When I saw him pull into the driveway, I knew something was up. He's always been pretty chill, but he's not the type to just let stuff slide either. I figured my parents had called him, trying to get him to talk some sense into me or something. I stayed in my room, hoping he was just there to see them and not me. But after about 20 minutes, there was a knock on my door. Of course it was Grandpa. He never really knocked on my door unless it was serious, so I braced myself for whatever was coming. I opened the door, and there he was, looking all serious. He didn't waste time with small talk. "We need to have a conversation," he said, his voice low and steady. I could tell he wasn't here for some casual chat. I sat down on my bed, figuring I might as well hear him out. He stood there for a second, looking around my room like he was trying to gather his thoughts. Then he just came out with it. "Why are you planning to move out?" At first I was kind of shocked he even had to ask, but then I realized my parents probably spun the whole situation to make it seem like I was being unreasonable. I wasn't surprised. They've always been good at playing the victim when things don't go their way. So I told him everything. About the rent, the control, the guilt trips, the Mexico fallout, and how they'd been treating me like I wasn't part of the family anymore. I explained that I didn't mind paying rent if it meant I could have some independence, but they were acting like landlords and parents whenever it suited them. I wasn't even mad anymore, I was just done with it all. Grandpa listened quietly, nodding every now and then. He didn't interrupt, which I appreciated. When I finished, he just sighed and sat down next to me. "You know," he started, "your parents aren't bad people, they're just confused." I raised an eyebrow at that. Confused? That was one way to put it. He went on, "They don't know how to balance being your parents and treating you like an adult. Charging you rent was probably their way of trying to teach you responsibility, but it got all mixed up in their heads." I stayed quiet, not really sure where he was going with this. Then he hit me with something I didn't expect, but I don't agree with how they've handled things. "Charging you rent at 16? That's not how I raised them." That kind of threw me for a loop. I'd always figured Grandpa was on their side, like he'd probably think I was being disrespectful or something. But hearing him say that, it actually felt like someone was finally on my side for once. He sighed again and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I didn't raise them to treat family like tenants. I don't know why they did that to you, but I'm going to talk to them. This isn't right." I didn't really know what to say. I mean, it was great that Grandpa was backing me up, but at the same time, I wasn't sure if anything he said would change how my parents acted. They were so stuck in their ways, and it felt like no amount of reasoning would make them see what they were doing wrong. "Thanks, Grandpa," I said, not really knowing what else to say. I appreciated that he was willing to step in, but I wasn't holding my breath for any big changes. That's when Grandpa hit me with the big one. "I think you should stay with me for a while." Now, I hadn't expected that at all. Grandpa lived about an hour away in this quiet little house near the mountains. It wasn't super far, but it was far enough that I wouldn't have to deal with my parents' nonsense every day. The idea of moving in with him actually sounded kind of nice, peaceful even. "You'd be able to focus on your business, finish school without all this drama," he continued. "I've got plenty of space, and you wouldn't have to pay me rent." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. No rent? A place where I could just be without all the stress? It sounded like heaven, but at the same time I felt a little guilty, like, shouldn't I be able to handle this on my own? Wasn't that the whole point of me paying rent in the first place? But Grandpa must have seen the hesitation on my face because he said, "This isn't about running away. It's about giving yourself some space to grow without all the pressure. You're already more independent than most people your age, but sometimes it's okay to let family help you out when things get tough." That kind of hit me. I'd been so focused on proving that I could handle everything on my own that I didn't even think about the fact that maybe I didn't have to. Maybe it was okay to take a step back and get some space from all the chaos. I nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll think about it," I said. Grandpa smiled, that kind of small, knowing smile he always had when he knew he'd said something that would stick with you. "Good, but don't take too long to decide. Your mental health is more important than trying to prove a point." After he left, I sat there for a long time, just thinking. Moving in with Grandpa sounded like the best option. But I also knew it wasn't going to be easy to just leave my parents behind, even after everything. They were still my parents. But at the same time, I couldn't keep living in this toxic situation. I needed space to figure things out for myself. That night, I started making plans. I wasn't sure exactly when I'd leave, but I knew it was going to happen soon. Grandpa was right. I needed to put myself first for once. And if that meant moving out and living with him for a while, then so be it. It was time to take control of my life for real this time. Update 2. So after my talk with Grandpa, I was all set on moving out, but I hadn't told my parents yet. I didn't know how they'd take it, and to be honest, I wasn't in the mood for another fight. I figured I'd just keep it quiet until I found the right moment to drop the news. But of course, things never go that smoothly, right? A couple of days later, I'm in my room, just chilling and going through listings for places near Grandpa's house. I was leaning more toward staying with him for a bit, but I wanted to see what other options were out there, just in case. That's when my mom knocks on the door, which, like I said before, never really happens unless something's up. I open the door, and she's standing there, looking all serious. "Can we talk?" she asks, and I can tell by her tone that this isn't going to be a casual chat. I sigh and let her in, figuring I might as well get it over with. She sits down on the edge of my bed, and I stay standing, leaning against my desk, waiting for whatever speech she's about to give. "We need to talk about your future," she says. And I can feel the lecture coming. She starts going on about how I've been distant lately, which, duh, of course I've been. How I'm not contributing enough to the family anymore, and how I need to take things more seriously now that I'm graduating soon. I just stood there, nodding along, but my patience was wearing thin. She hadn't once acknowledged any of the reasons I was pulling away, or the fact that I'd been paying them rent for years. Then she dropped this. "Your father and I were talking, and we think it's time you start paying more rent now that you'll have a full-time job soon." I couldn't believe it. After everything, they wanted more money? Like really? I'm already paying $300 a month, and I'm barely even living like I'm part of the family anymore. Now they want me to pay even more just because I'm about to graduate? It felt like they didn't care about anything except what they could get out of me. I stood there for a second just staring at her, and then I finally said, "I'm not paying more rent. In fact, I'm not paying you anything anymore. I'm moving out." That got her attention. Her eyes went wide, and she looked genuinely shocked. I guess they didn't expect me to actually leave. She started asking me where I was going, how I was going to afford it, all the usual stuff. I told her I'd be staying with Grandpa for a while, and that I'd already talked to him about it. That's when things really blew up. She went off about how I was disrespecting the family by running off to live with Grandpa instead of staying with them, how they'd done so much for me, and now I was just abandoning them. It was the same guilt trip they'd been using for years, but this time, I wasn't falling for it. I cut her off mid-sentence and said, "I'm not abandoning anyone. You guys made this decision for me when you started treating me like a tenant instead of your kid. I've been paying rent since I was 16, and it's never been enough for you. Now you want more? No, I'm done." She didn't like that. She started crying, saying she didn't understand why I was being so selfish. But it wasn't about being selfish, it was about taking control of my life. They couldn't just keep using me for money, while pretending they cared about me as part of the family. Just as things were heating up, my dad comes into the room, probably because he heard my mom crying. He asked what was going on, and before I could even explain, my mom starts telling him how I'm moving out and going to live with Grandpa. Now he's pissed. "You're not going anywhere," he says, like he's some kind of authority over my life. "You're going to stay here and contribute to this family like you're supposed to." I couldn't help but laugh a little at that. It was like they didn't get it at all. "I've been contributing," I said. "I've been paying you rent. I've been handling my own stuff, and you still act like I owe you something. But guess what? I don't. I'm an adult now, and I'm leaving." Now they're both yelling at me, telling me how ungrateful I am, how they've done so much for me, blah blah blah. It's the same old song and dance, but this time I wasn't listening. I was done. I just stood there, letting them vent, and when they finally paused to catch their breath, I said, "I'm leaving at the end of the month, whether you like it or not." My dad was furious. He stormed out of the room, probably to cool off or whatever, but my mom stayed. She wasn't crying anymore. Now she was just looking at me like she didn't even recognize me. And honestly, I didn't recognize them anymore either. It was like we weren't even family at this point, just people living in the same house, pretending we cared about each other. She stood up, looked me in the eye, and said, "If you leave, don't expect to come back." I didn't hesitate. "I won't." She walked out, and that was it. No more yelling, no more guilt trips, just silence. The next couple of weeks were tense, to say the least. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was cold and distant, but I didn't care anymore. I'd already started packing up my stuff, and I was just counting down the days until I could leave for good. Grandpa came by a couple more times during that period, mostly to check in on me and make sure everything was going okay. He didn't say much about my parents, but I could tell he was disappointed in them. He never said it out loud, but the way he acted around them made it clear. Finally, the day came. I had everything packed up, loaded into my car, and I was ready to go. My parents didn't even come out to say goodbye. They just stayed in the house, pretending like I wasn't leaving. And honestly, I was fine with that. I didn't need some fake emotional farewell. I was ready to start fresh. As I drove away, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more guilt trips, no more pressure. No more feeling like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. It was just me, moving forward, ready to figure out what came next. And for the first time in a long time, I was actually excited about the future. Update 3. The day I drove away from my parents' house, I didn't really know how to feel. It was like this weird mix of relief and sadness. I mean, they're still my parents, even though they'd been treating me like a tenant for years. But at the same time, I felt like I was finally free. I didn't have to worry about their constant nagging, their controlling attitudes, or any more guilt trips. It was over. I got to Grandpa's house in about an hour. It wasn't a huge house, but it was cozy, tucked away near some mountains with a quiet neighborhood and not a lot of people around. The kind of place where you can just breathe, you know? Grandpa came out to help me with my bags, and we didn't say much. I think he could tell I wasn't in the mood for a big conversation. Once I had my stuff in the guest room, I just sat on the bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. It was weird not having that tension hanging over me anymore. No more worrying about what my parents were going to say or do next. I'd been living in that stress for so long that it felt strange to be free of it. Grandpa knocked on the door after a while and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. He liked to take these long walks in the evening, and honestly, I needed to clear my head, so I said yeah. We didn't talk much while we were walking, but it felt good just to be outside, not thinking about all the crap I'd just left behind. Eventually, though, Grandpa broke the silence. "You made the right choice, you know," he said, not looking at me. just watching the road ahead of us. Sometimes family doesn't always get it right. Your parents, they're stuck in their ways, but you did what you needed to do. I nodded, not really knowing how to respond. He was right, but it still felt heavy, leaving like that. It wasn't the big dramatic exit I thought it would be. I didn't slam doors or yell at them on the way out. It just kind of happened, and now I was here, trying to figure out what came next. Over the next few weeks, things started to feel more normal. I settled into a routine at Grandpa's place, helped him with stuff around the house, focused on my business, and started prepping for my new job after graduation. It was peaceful, but every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering what my parents were doing. Did they miss me? Did they even care that I was gone? I hadn't heard from them since I left, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. One day, about a month after I'd moved out, I got a text from my dad. It was short, just a few words, "We need to talk." I stared at my phone for a good minute, not sure how to feel about that. What could he possibly want now? But something in me, maybe curiosity, made me text him back. I said, "Okay, when?" He replied almost immediately, "Come over tomorrow." I didn't really want to go back there, but I felt like I needed to, like maybe this was the closure I hadn't gotten when I left. So I agreed. The next day, I drove back to the house. The same house that used to feel like home but now just felt like a place I used to live. I parked outside and just sat in the car for a while, trying to gather myself before going in. When I finally walked up to the door, it felt so weird, like I was a guest at my own parents' house. My mom opened the door, and she didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let me in. The atmosphere was tense, like they didn't know what to say either. We all sat down in the living room, and it was like waiting for something to happen, but nobody wanted to start. Finally, my dad spoke up. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said, his voice a little quieter than usual, "about how things went down." I just nodded, waiting for him to go on. My mom sat next to him, looking uncomfortable, like she didn't really want to be there. "We didn't handle it right," he continued, rubbing his hands together. "Charging you rent like that, it wasn't fair. We didn't realize how much it was affecting you." I was surprised. I didn't expect them to admit anything, let alone apologize. But my dad kept going. "We thought we were helping you, teaching you responsibility, but I guess we were just pushing you away. And when you left, well, it made us realize that maybe we were wrong." Hearing him say that was honestly kind of shocking. For years, they'd acted like they were always right, like I was the one being difficult, and now here they were, admitting that they messed up. My mom finally spoke up. "We want to try and fix things," she said, her voice shaky. "We don't want you to feel like you're not part of the family." I sat there taking it all in. Part of me wanted to just let it go and forgive them. But another part of me remembered all the times they guilt-tripped me, all the times they treated me like I didn't matter unless I was giving them something. It wasn't that simple. "I don't know," I said after a long pause. "I'm glad you're saying this now, but it doesn't change what's happened. I can't just pretend everything's okay because you realized it now." They looked disappointed. But I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. I'd worked too hard to get out of that toxic situation, and I wasn't going to just jump back into it because they suddenly felt bad. "I need more time," I told them. "I'm not saying we can't fix things, but it's going to take a while. I need to focus on me for a bit." They nodded, and we left it at that. It wasn't the big reconciliation they probably hoped for, but it was a start, and honestly, that's all I could give them right now. When I left the house that day, I didn't feel the same weight I had when I first moved out. This time, it felt different, like maybe there was a chance things could get better someday, but I wasn't in a rush to find out. I had my own life to live now, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was really in control. Grandpa was waiting for me when I got back, and I told him everything. He didn't say much, just smiled and nodded, like he already knew how it would turn out. And maybe he did. He's always been good at that. So yeah, I'm still figuring things out, but I know one thing for sure: leaving was the best decision I ever made.